Hello, wider listeners. Is once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it's that time of the week where we come onto your radio dial and we tell you what is going on here in the Kalamazoo community. We try to cut through all of that corporate capitalist propaganda and all that BS and give you some of that straight up truth right here at the local level, spanning out into the county, statewide, national, and the international. It's a fun little working class news and analysis program we like to call Media Cyphers, only here on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. Anyway, we've got some pretty hefty topics to dig into on the show today. Might be joined by a guest in just a little bit here. And quick reminder, just want all of the listeners out there to know there's a couple of ways you can listen to the show. You can, of course, listen to it as you are right now, live on the radio, and good for you on that. I appreciate you tuning in. You can also find us online, couple places. You can find, we just started a podcast over on Podbean, and again, we share those out on our Facebook page as they get published. But the Podbean podcast in particular, we try to comb through the material that we produce and bring you some of the best stuff. Really pertinent analysis and interviews and all that good stuff that you really like. But if you're a completionist, I did decide we are going to be uploading our full episodes on YouTube still. So, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a good way if you can't listen to the show in its normal radio time slot, and you want to hear every little syllable of what we have to say on the program, then in that case, that is quite all right as well. So again, so please subscribe to that. Of course, best way, most current way, and most nostalgic way to listen to the program is right here on 89.1 WIDR. Anyway, I think something we might start with here is, again, another update to sorry, I got a little distracted. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. All right, so I wanted to give an update on an issue that we've touched on several times in the program, and we have a little bit of good news here. Just a little. But it does seem that graphic packaging is at least starting to acknowledge some of the not so good work they've been doing in the community, or at least some of the outlying negative externalities, as we want to call them, i.e. potentially giving people asthma, noxious odors coming from the factory, and demographically disparate health outcomes in a predominantly black and working class neighborhood, i.e. the Northside. But it sounds like we might be willing to give back just a little bit. This is from an MLive article. It was published last week, December 2nd. Kalamazoo factory at the center of Health Probe ready to discuss benefits agreement with the community. Residents want money to relocate. This is written by Brad Devereaux. Odor complaints, large rising plumes of steam, questions about health concerns tied to pollution. The topics of conversation surrounding Graphic Packaging International's Kalamazoo factory have recently included discussion of potential negative impact on people in the community. Now plans are underway for the city of Kalamazoo to enter into a community benefits agreement with owners of the factory. Though details of what such an agreement would look like are yet to be decided, but some residents wanted to include things such as money for residents to relocate, health-related services, and air monitoring. Deanne Winfield, who lives on the north side within view of Graphic Packaging International, said she wants money for families to relocate to be included in the agreement. Winfield and her family members have suffered from asthma. Her daughter died after an asthma attack, Winfield said, and her son is on a machine to help him breathe due to severe asthma. He was in the hospital last week, she said, but he could not stay long because of the rise in COVID cases. They can afford to relocate us, Winfield said. They got millions of dollars. Quick aside, the tragic thing here is the idea that these folks would even have to relocate in the first place, and have their neighborhood more or less be turned into a sacrifice zone, which, if you're not keyed into some of that environmental justice lingo, it means basically when there's heavy manufacturing either next to or in a urban neighborhood, it's usually next to people who are poor, usually people of color, and it's basically called a sacrifice zone because the people who live in that area are going to be dealing with a lot of the same kinds of things that the people in this article have been. The health hazards, life expectancy decrease, having more difficulty breathing, etc. Anyway, going back to the article here, GPI agreed to enter an agreement with the city, though the details are yet to be determined, the company said. Graphic Packaging is committed to working with the city to select members of the steering committee by December 1st of this year, and is working towards a proposed agreement for review by the City Commission by April of 2022, GPI said in a statement about the Community Benefits Agreement. GPI said on Monday, December 6th, the City of Kalamazoo will announce the 8 members who will serve on a steering committee to lead discussions to create the benefits agreement. So that would have been, I believe, just yesterday. Going on, I'm going to kind of skip past some of this commentary from the company itself. The community's concerns are over an odor in the air and questions about possible health effects tied to air quality and chemicals released in the neighborhood. State health officials are investigating asthma cases in the neighborhood. The Michigan Department of Health and Human Services confirmed with them live in August. Officials are working on an investigation of asthma prevalence and related hospitalizations in Kalamazoo and the community surrounding Graphic Packaging and the Kalamazoo Water Reclamation Plant, MDHHS, told MLive in July. MDHHS is working with other agencies to evaluate chemicals found in the neighborhood. Resident Timothy Johnson said he lived on Edward Street nearby the plant for years. He now lives in the area of Rose and Hopkins in the neighborhood west of GPI. Johnson said he wants money for relocation and funds to pay for medical care. He said he suffers from COPD and anxiety. Jeremy Avery, 33, grew up on the north side in the area of Church and Prouty, where he also lives now. A lot of people in his family have asthma-related issues, lung issues, and heavy breathing issues, he said. Avery has been following discussion of the issue since he was in high school, he said. It's Kalamazoo's dirty little secret over on the north side, he said. The odor associated with the factory on the north side is clearly a quality of life issue, he said. They know what is going on over here. They have a factory like that close to a residential area. It was something that was going to come to light eventually, Avery said. The COVID-19 pandemic made it worse, he said, because people were stuck inside. It's almost like the city trumps what the community living next to it says, Avery says. And this might be in reference to the fact that the city of Kalamazoo still continues to give the corporation tax breaks. Air quality checks and measures could be part of the community benefits agreement, he said. The factory should work to be part of the neighborhood instead of just a footprint in the neighborhood. They're destroying the quality of life in the north side, and they're not contributing to it. The city has to step up and do something, he said. It's been a long time coming. Again, there's a lot more that goes into this article. I'd recommend y'all check it out. But again, it's Kalamazoo Factory at Center. of Health Pro ready to discuss benefits agreement with community. Residents want money to relocate. And just a couple of quick facts about that. They are looking at a ballpark figure in the $600 million range. Hold on. I'm sorry, actually. Oh, no, I misspoke. I'm sorry. That's in reference to a separate project. But it's possible to use some of that money towards that. I do want to say this has been the fact that we are discussing a community benefits agreement at this point is a good sign. It means that public pressure is bearing at least some fruit. Now, again, there's still deep issues of environmental racism and classism that are baked into issues like this that, one should certainly not ignore. But I like to think when we get certain concessions like this, it's a good sign because it means that the people power and the sort of attention that is being paid to a corporation like Graphic Packaging International is sufficient that they're at least going to start trying to address some of the grievances that the citizens of the community of Kalamazoo have made against them. So we need to keep following this story, and we need to make sure that they don't try to get away with just dishing out some chump change, as it were, in a situation where they basically turned the Northside into a sacrifice zone, as I was talking about earlier, or at least chunks of it near Graphic Packaging. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna cut to break. We come back. We got a lot more to talk about here on the program. This is Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR FM. We're online at widrfm.org. Your only source for political revolution on your only station for Radio Evolution. Hello, we are back. This is Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So, with that, going from the bigger picture, talking about the broader implications of, what capitalism be doing to us, I wanted to use that to kind of relate to a more localized story that covers here's how this is actually playing out in our backyard. And this is a very recent article from MLive. It was published December 6th. The headline is, "This is Needless Death Day After Day, Health Officials Say as COVID-19 Pushes Hospitals to Capacity." I'm going to read a little bit from this article. Coming up in the next 10-20 minutes, we're going to have a couple guests on. We're going to interview, talk about a really important and great community event coming up. But for now, let's talk a little bit more about how the ongoing pandemic is really straining our local hospitals here in the Southwest Michigan area. Hospitals, this is written by Brian McVicker, by the way. Hospitals in West Michigan are being pushed to capacity as the coronavirus surges, forcing officials to delay non-emergency procedures and prepare. Sorry. Having a quick little glitch here. Give me just a second. All right. Sorry about that. All right. Anyway, hospitals in West Michigan are being pushed to capacity as the coronavirus surges, forcing officials to delay non-emergency procedures, prepare to add extra beds, and bring on more staff amid what one doctor described as needless death day after day. At Spectrum Health, a federal team of 20 physicians, nurses, and respiratory therapists are expected to begin caring for patients this weekend. The team was brought in to relieve staff at the health system, where 1,110 surgeries have been deferred since the surge began. And again, what a lot of people don't think about with the hospitals filling up is it really limits the hospital's capacity to do a lot of their normal services and scheduled procedures. At Mercy Health St. Mary's, the 32-bed intensive care unit is at 100% capacity, and a fleet of 10 ventilators were expected to arrive Friday, December 3rd. And staff at University of Michigan Health West are prepared, if the surge gets worse, to place patients in operating rooms in other parts of the hospital where acute care typically isn't provided. We're now well beyond anything we've seen before here in West Michigan with the number of hospitalized patients, at least at Spectrum Health, said Dr. Daryl Elmucci, president of Spectrum Health West Michigan. Later, when describing the surge, during which 141 COVID-19 patients died at Spectrum in November, he said, "This is needless death day after day." Leaders of the three hospitals spoke with reporters about the COVID-19 surge during an online news conference on Friday. They urged residents to get the coronavirus vaccine, wear masks in public, and show patience and gratitude for healthcare workers, many of whom are emotionally and physically exhausted. If you know a healthcare worker, check in with them, tell them that you support them, thank them for their work and everything they've done, said Dr. Matt Bierzak, president of Mercy Health St. Mary's. Demonstrate that you care by wearing a mask when you're out in public. And by the way, I'm going to stress that. Again, I walk around a lot in town, campus and stuff. Again, the Rona is not over. It's mutated into a transformer now. So please, wear that stuff when you're outside. Anyway, Spectrum had a recorded high of 464 COVID-19 patients at its network of hospitals in the region as of December 1st. As of November 30th, 87% of its coronavirus patients were unvaccinated. The COVID-19 surge is playing out across the state. Michigan led the country in COVID-19 hospitalizations this week, ranking number one for the average number of people hospitalized by day, stressing hospitals and burdening already overworked staff. It also took the top spot for average daily deaths, which are now higher than 70 for the first time since January. Meanwhile, case numbers dropped after reaching record levels about 2 weeks ago. Most counties saw declines, though new cases per capita kept all 83 of the state's counties at the highest risk level. This is absolutely a time of reckoning for healthcare, especially on the hospital side, said Peter Hahn, president and CEO of University of Michigan Health West. This prolonged Delta surge combined with staffing shortages, exhaustion, it's a very difficult time. And I want to speak just for a personal level. So I am also a healthcare worker. I don't work at the hospital. I do in-home care. And this is something we've been seeing across the whole industry. My own work was experiencing a lot of staff shortages, and it's very hard. It was particularly hard to maintain. During the pandemic, where it's one of those types of jobs where you can't call in. You gotta go in. You gotta do it. Basically everybody in the healthcare industry has been working extra hours or has really been pushing themselves to the brink over the course of this pandemic. One could hope, we've seen a little bit of the strike wave kind of manifest itself. And I think we've covered a few stories over the last couple months about various nurses taking action or going on kind of a big protest or strike. But it is essential for us to remember how important healthcare workers are, and the fact that they are still dealing with this is tremendously sad. And of course, the big ones you could point the finger to are companies like Pfizer for not providing the information about their vaccine patent around the world. And of course, the state of things in the U.S., where the consistent miseducation of the American populace means we still have a lot of Rona floating around and a lot of people who either don't take it seriously or think it's some sort of deep state Illuminati plot. And, as I like to say, kids, the ruling class is the ruling class. You don't need conspiracy theories, and you just got to remember Occam's razor. They're not going to put a chip in there to track you when you carry a phone around with you all day. Yes, there's a tracking device. So anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent there. Let me give you some more numbers just to kind of further paint this out. Spectrum Health Butterworth Hospital is at 90% capacity, while Spectrum Health Blodgett Hospital was listed at 100%. Mercy Health St. Mary's was listed at 94%. And University of Michigan Health West, formerly Metro Health, was at 89% occupancy. And I wanted to. This article is really great because it gives you a really good picture of what it's like to be on the ground in the hospitals during the pandemic. I'd really recommend my listeners check it out. Again, this is an article from MLive. The headline, this is needless death day after day, health officials say, as COVID-19 pushes hospitals to capacity. And it's a really good look at what is happening right here in our backyard as a direct result of COVID. All right, I think with that, we're going to take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR FM or online at widrfm.org. Quick reminder, you can tune into our show on the internet. We have a podcast on Podbean, which basically puts together our best of as we go along. They usually publish about 1 or 2, sometimes 3 episodes a month. And then we also are continuing to post our full episodes on our YouTube page. You can go ahead and subscribe to that. If you really like the show, you want to hear the whole thing, but you just are not available Tuesdays, noon to 2, that is the best way to do it. Anyway, we will be right back. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR, your only source for political revolution on your only source for radio evolution. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widrfm.org. By the way, so we are joined now by Connar Klock, and before I tell you who that is and all that stuff, you are our first guest back in the program since Rona started. You are our first guest since Rona. So welcome to the studio, and thank you for taking time out of your day to swing by and tell us about what's up.
Of course. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so honored that I get to christen this, not post-COVID life, but, intermittent COVID life.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of just talking about, knock on wood, maybe get things safe enough. We won't have to go through another one, but we'll see. But, one of the great things about being able to go outside again, if you're vaccinated, you're masking up, is the return of live theater. And that's... Part of that's the big reason I invited you on the program today. There's going to be a play coming up this weekend over at the Doormouse Theater, and it's an adaptation. If you know local artists and Denise Miller has been out there in the community for doing some really good work for a while now, and they came out with a poetry book last year. For the shooting, which is chiefly about gun violence and the mass shooting epidemic that's going on, has been going on here in the United States. Connor's the director. Also, Denise wanted to make it, but life happens. There's meetings and such. I certainly know all about that. I guess I want to start by, Connar, could you tell a little bit, tell the folks at home just a little bit about, your theater background, and then how this project was brought to your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm a kid from a small town up north, and I came to Western to get my acting degree. and stayed in Kalamazoo because I like looking at like a coastal elite look at the Midwest, right? And wondering why the hell do I need to go to New York or LA or Chicago to do what I want to do when stuff's happening right here? So Denise came to me with their poetry collection, How to Make an American Mass Shooter, which was a draft. It hasn't been even published yet. And they came to me with this collection and was like, do you think this could be a play? Do you think that this could be on stage? The way that Denise has another collection, Ligatures, which then made it onto stage in a similar way with Face Off Theater Company called The Ligature for Black Bodies. So I took the script, or I took the collection back home with me, and I started just making notes in it, and it really came alive to me. It was a very live piece of poetry. And over the pandemic, poetry has been kind of coming out to me a little bit more, I thought that plays were so just overwritten, small said it better. So, we were looking for a great project that said something that was present, that was live. And Denise came to me with it, and it was just true. It was just the moment. And it was, yes, this is absolutely what needs to be said at this moment, right now. And as we've been seeing over the last couple weeks, with Oxford last week and with the Kyle Rittenhouse, like one of these original poems was about Kyle Rittenhouse. It's developing still as something that is live and present and needed right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention, like, just the timeliness of, like, the play going up this week, and we are, like, right in the shadow of what just happened at Oxford. And, obviously, there's mass shootings almost every day in the U.S. And I guess before we get too deep in, I might have a couple subject matter questions, but I'm also curious, as somebody who used to do an amount of playwriting myself. What was it like, or like what were either like the challenges or the rewards, I guess, too, of adapting this book of poetry into a theatrical performance? And is like there any one in particular you think like really pops or comes to life when brought to the stage through performance?
Yeah, so I think that it's always interesting to adapt something to stage, particularly poetry. Poetry, I think, lends itself a little bit easier than a lot of things. But because it's already performative, right? It's already something that is a spoken word, usually, as well as to being written. But I think that bringing something like that to stage, Denise would be able to speak better to the actual writing of it. But I know that I went home with that poetry collection and I treated it like it was the script at first, right? I went to my meetings with Denise and the work that we did together to kind of work on how it would be presented and adapted was informed by, I looked at just the poems themselves. And if I had to stage just the poems with a collection of actors, how would I do it? How would I tell just the poems themselves? And for me, as the person who ended up, realizing the vision as I have on stage, you can definitely see seeds of that like part of it was taken into, well, no, we don't actually have to say anything. We just have to show something here, and stuff like that, right? We can live in an abstract space where there's lots of symbolism. And that's true with this piece. It's very evident that there's lots of symbolism, which I found was true in the poetry collection too. You read the poem and the names of people are redacted. In some of the towns, Denise has the towns redacted, and some of the information that might make you over-intellectualize what that poem is. But there's enough information for you to be able to recall for yourself, oh, that was Las Vegas. Oh, that was Orlando. Oh, that was this. Oh, that was that. And while still having this subliminal effect of feeling just the overwhelming piling on of it, right? And that you're able to confuse them too, because was it this 15-year-old in Nevada, or was it this, 13-year-old in Alabama? Or was it, oh, that one was the 15-year-old in Arkansas, wasn't it? So I think it's really interesting how there's that dualism at play as well, of living in these places and times that we can recall these events, while still living in an abstract space where we can apply it to the future and the present while still talking about the past.
That's really fascinating, and that's another like thing that really makes me want to check this out this weekend. But something that it really gets to me, it's kind of want to respond off something you said there, was there's this way of like it's so overwhelming. I talked a little bit in the intro about how like there's school shooting almost every day, or mass shooting almost every day, and I do wonder, was it if this is something you were thinking about in the direction of it, the way that sometimes like it happens so often. It's almost like a lot of people living in this country are almost numb to it at this point. Not to say like people ignore the problem or they're not aware of it. It's just you get kind of desensitized to the level of violence. Was that part of your journey as a director, trying to really get back to the emotional core of these events and like the effect that they have on us?
Yeah, absolutely. And that plays with that dualism, right? That trying to, at the exact same time as making this very real and present and remind people that they are real human beings that perpetuated these events. And with our play, we really, really talk about the parents a lot, and the part that parents have to play in these events. And making them, all of these parents have said something that I have heard real people say multiple times in real life, right? So I don't think that there's a problem at all in the way that we're able to recognize that this is present, the way that we have this. Yeah, so definitely with that sense of we get desensitized, we get placated, we get washed over. It just becomes another thing that we swipe past, on our phones. Another thing happened. And we're hoping that by the way that the play goes and the way that it is structured, that we're able to use the newscaster sections of the play to really kind of get that feeling of overwhelming, of placation, whilst then switching over to the parents and then being, okay, these are parents dealing with how to raise their kids. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And these boys that are these white boys that are dealing with, these issues of toxic masculinity and conditioning from society and their parents, and then, how, that was another interesting thing that we had to deal with as well, was how forgiving do we be? You know what I mean? How do we hold space for asking questions about the bigger picture while still indicting the individuals that have committed the events? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I know. That's something we talk a lot about on the show too. Is we try like avoid punching down. Understand that like there's typically these are always like the result of much bigger actors. So thinking about things like the gun lobby, or just the way that not to get too Marxist, but like capitalist alienation, how that affects a lot of these kids, and they get kind of on the some of them get onto these kind of like fashy YouTube pipelines and stuff. So that might be kind of outside the scope of what we're talking about here, but I guess that is also a part of it. Yeah. We talk about. Let me ask this. We mentioned. Oxford just happened, as well as like Rittenhouse verdict. I'm kind of curious, like. Did that have a tangible effect on you and your actors going into you're a couple weeks out and you have like these two events unfold right before the play goes live? But I'm just kind of curious what kind of reaction y'all had to it, and if that kind of anything from that bled into the way the show was put together or will be performed this week.
Yeah, definitely. The feeling in the room, after the Rittenhouse verdict was released, we were in the room and I walked in and I read the poem that Denise had written, unabstracted into the play, just the poem itself. And we were talking about it, and you could feel it in the air, right? You could feel it in the room. And then when Oxford happened, we were galvanized. We were, yes, this is what we've been trying to say for a couple months now. And now something that is so highly parentally involved I mean, it's the exact story almost that we're telling. So then I reached out to Denise as well and was like, I feel it was weird too, because you don't want to, we're not trying to in any way, capitalize on a tragedy, but it's what we're talking about and trying to say something important about. And if there's anything that's going to make people realize that this is present and live in this moment, it is this event. So I reached out to Denise and was like, are you considering, us adding something for Oxford? And we ended up doing it. We did end up adding something to the play last minute on Saturday that does mention Oxford and some of the dynamics of how it went down.
Wow, okay.
Specifically the text messages that the mother sent.
Yeah.
We have an actor on stage saying those text messages.
Wow. So okay, this is the big philosophical question. So just try not to.
As long as you can deal with my rambling.
Oh no, that's quite all right. We love rambling here on the show. So this is kind of a core question. This is something I ask a lot of artists when we have artists on the show. Particularly I think like with such a heavy subject matter as what y'all are dealing with. I think it kind of resonates with me, this idea of like kind of the role of the role of art in a time of breakdown, and whether we're talking about mass shootings or climate change or Black Lives Matter, or number of these other really pressing, huge existential issues that we're dealing with. What do you think? What is the importance of creating this sort of art? Is it kind of for you? Is it a way for audiences to engage emotionally with these subjects they otherwise might not? Is it a way to spread awareness? Like, well, what is for you is the emotional core of creating this art about this particular subject?
Yeah. Oh gosh, what a good question. I think it's a whole list of things. I think that I think it started with a question. I think it always kind of at least for me, it starts with a feeling or a question. Something that I either want to explore or I wonder why nobody else has. You know what I mean? So there's that question as an artist. And I think that it's important to make things that are present, right? Specifically with theater, but I think it's true for any art form. With theater specifically, we try to, or at least I try to, be reflective of now, right? It's the present. And I think that's relevant as well, right? If we're not talking about the times now and reflecting off of the times, why the hell would we expect anybody to come or care? I care about the people that we're working with now, and I think that that specifically writing it and working through it is definitely something that also helps us answer that question, right? As artists ourselves, right? So we want our audiences to be able to come and to be able to experience the play, to learn something from it, to raise awareness from it, all of the things that you listed. But I think also it helps the artists themselves try to work through something and maybe understand something that might be larger than them. I know that's definitely something that I've been able to reconcile with this play, right? Is look at myself and ask myself how I feel about certain things attached to guns, and whether I had connected the certain threads that Denise and I have throughout this in my own life and in my own subconscious, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think that it's, for me at least, it's been a process for all of it. Raising awareness and also asking myself, what am I saying or doing about the phenomenon?
And I guess like one last little, I'm kind of curious about this because you mentioned it, and then I think kind of do some closing questions. But you mentioned so the core of it is kind of like the vast majority of mass shooters are as you said, like usually young, white, identify as male. Not only as a director, but just as an artist in general, like what do you think is like, what do I think particularly like, you know, older white folks need to be doing to, like, you know, either talk to the younger generation, or especially through art. Like, how can we use art as a vector to try to make sure that that especially like younger white men don't get alienated or radicalized in a certain way that can cause these kinds of tragedies to happen?
Yeah, that's such an excellent question. I think that the answer will be different for every single person based on what their experience has brought them to this moment. I really do. I myself, and you know, I can only speak for myself. I'm the type of artist that is, I have an extremely thick skin. I've been through a whole ordeal throughout my whole life, and have a wide understanding of what brings to people to where they are, both on a large scale and a small scale. You know, how one small comment from one small teacher in your second grade, how that can manifest into something that, you know, affects your mental health until you're in your 50s. You know, so I think that I myself approach every person with the hope that I can talk to them and try to, you know, at least make them know that they're able, I'm still going to probably listen to you, and I'm then going to respond and reflect. And it might not necessarily be accepting. I would never say that I'm a tolerant person. I don't like that word. But I definitely am receptive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's something that I try to bring to my art, is that we are humans, right? And that there are some extremely out of our hands things at play in some of the things that we do, really. However, accepting, you know, consequences and things for our actions is still necessary, right? And I think that getting to a place where we understand that, in a place of empathy, where we're able to really connect to and understand harm that we cause other people, whether by our words or by something that we write online or by walking into a school with a gun, you know, we need to be able to understand what our actions do to affect people in a larger scale.
Okay. Well, you know, Connar, I just want to say thank you again so much for taking time out of your day to come and talk to us about this play. I would like could you just tell the folks at home, when is it, where is it, and I guess particularly, like, if there's anything else you really wanted to discuss that I didn't bring up, feel free to go ahead and do that now. But
yeah, I mean, the play is it's being produced by Queer Theater Kalamazoo, you know, which focuses on new plays and local talent. And queer stories, uplifting queer artists. Hopefully that's obvious. The play will run at the Doormouse Theater this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The doors open at 7 p.m. We're going to have an artist, Rebecca Chan, or they go by Rebs. I apologize for that. Rebs will be performing starting at 7:30 before the show to kind of put people into kind of a calmer, soothed state so that they're able to feel open and comfortable with the work. You know, try to be as little therapeutic as we could to our audiences. You know, and all of our tickets at Queer Theater are name your price. They're not pay what you can, they are name your price, specifically for accessibility purposes. We want anybody to be able to come and see our work no matter what.
Oh, okay. You know, that's wonderful. I really appreciate that philosophy. I know, like, as a kid who grew up in the Edison neighborhood, really loved theater. Sometimes it was hard as a teenager finding stuff in the good price range. So, like, anytime theater companies are doing that stuff, like, yeah, it really that stuff is important. You never know. You might awaken a young artist or a community member. That's sort of a pricing idea, I guess. But
yeah.
All right, so again, everybody, that's Before the Shooting with Denise Miller. It's going up at Doormouse, which is right over on Portage Road. I can't remember the number of address, but it's
at 1030 Portage Street.
There we go. Yeah, also in the Edison neighborhood. So yeah, please everybody check it out. Anything else, Connor, before we close things out?
Yeah, tickets for that show can be bought at queertk.org, and that name your price tool is right there on the website, so you can you just type in whatever price you want.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think we're going to go ahead and take a little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Again, you can find our show here on the radio, or you can check us out online. Check on our Facebook page, where you can find our podcast episodes as we upload them. We have a podcast on Podbean, and if you want to hear the full episode of each week, subscribe to our YouTube page, please. So we get this great local coverage and analysis out there. Anyway, keep that locked. We got a lot more coming up on the way, only here on 89.1 WIDR, your only source for political revolution. Hello, everyone. We are back. This is Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Again, I want to give a big thank you to Connar Klock for coming on to the program to talk about the play that they have got going on this weekend over at Doormouse Theater. It's before the shooting, and it's a play about the mass shooting epidemic that's been going on in the United States for, it seems like 20 years now or so. But then you can find more info about that, Doormouse Theater or Queer Theater Kalamazoo. So with that, let's switch gears a little bit. So I wanted to talk about, this is a national story, and I'm sure this has been a huge issue of discussion past week, and I'm probably not the first news person or person with a microphone you've heard talk about it. But we are at a very dangerous precipice when it comes to abortion rights in this country. Just to give y'all a quick synopsis, the Supreme Court is currently talking about precedent with a decision that seems completely primed to really overturn Roe v. Wade, i.e. kind of put the onus of abortion's legality onto the states, which would effectively make abortion legal in about half the country overnight. I cannot really overstate the dire and severe nature of this, and even a lot of abortion rights advocates are actively preparing for the worst, and it is almost a foregone conclusion at this point that sometime, likely by this summer, Roe v. Wade is no longer going to be the law of the land. Now, I'm going to, as we get closer to that reality, we're going to have more concrete coverage talking about the implications of that. I wanted to spend some time on my program really focusing on a couple of things, which is one, asking the question, where did the anti-abortion movement come from? That's question number one. Question number two, is there any way our current government could have stopped this, or could still stop this from occurring? And I think those are two key questions, because they dig into the real roots of this matter in a way that you don't really see a lot in the mainstream media, which is again framed like, there's the pro-choice and pro-life advocate, and they yell at each other on a CNN panel or something like that, and you don't really get anything constructive done, and you basically hear the same three arguments. More often than not, it's the anti-abortion activist yells over the other panelists. But it is important, really important to really dig into the question of like, where did this come from? Because, as we've mentioned on the show, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into it on today's program, this was not always the case. In fact, there's this tweet that's been making the rounds that says, the evangelical belief in the sanctity of a fetus is younger or is not as old than the McDonald's Happy Meal, which is to say that a lot of the Christian right, the evangelical Christian right, didn't even really have an opinion on abortion until the 1970s. And there are some very specific reasons for that, which I'm going to talk about in just a second here. So, again, I thought it would be a good idea to, for those who aren't familiar with some of this history, I think it's always critical, when we're at historical junctures like this, we need to ask, how did we get here? And, who's responsible? How did they do it? Because in this, as is often the case, it's always, typically there are some capitalist mechanisms at work. And in this case, a lot of it has to do with political power. And I'm going to try to explain in, 3 chess moves or less how you get the anti-abortion movement from the desire to consolidate political power for pro-corporate interests. So let's start a little bit by talking about, excuse me. So who in particular had a big role in this stuff? And one of the big linchpins of this was a fella named Paul Weyrich, who he's since passed, but he was a very well-known conservative political activist, and who's probably most famous for co-founding the Heritage Foundation, which, if you haven't heard us talk about them on the show, again, do some Googling or DuckDuckGoing when you get a chance. The Heritage Foundation is one of the main conservative think tanks and lobbying firms that has really put their stamp on almost every conservative piece of legislation in the last several decades. Very, very much coordinate with like ALEC, that's the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is basically when corporations basically just write the legislation for congressmen and then they rubber stamp it. Because that's democracy, folks. Yeah, woo. So I'm going to cite, there's a couple of articles that I'm citing heavily with this information you should check out. But Politico did an article focused a lot on the specific link between the abortion rights movement and, the abortion rights movement and some stuff that was going on legally with a Christian university trying to prevent segregation. I'm not going to lean into that particular element of it super hard, but if you'd like to find out more about that, it's Politico article, Religious Right, the Real Origins of It. You can look that up. But it's important to understand the context of that abortion was not always seen as immoral or even, outside the scope of biblical practice until quite recently. And I'm going to kind of emphasize that by here's an example. As late as 1968, 1971. Here's just an example. A symposium sponsored by the Christian Medical Society and Christianity Today refused to characterize abortion as sinful, citing individual health, family welfare, and social responsibility as justifications for ending a pregnancy. In 1971, delegates to the Southern Baptist Convention in St. Louis, Missouri, passed a resolution encouraging Southern Baptists to work for legislation that will allow the possibility of abortion under such conditions as rape, incest, clear evidence of severe fetal deformity, and carefully ascertained evidence of the likelihood of damage to the emotional, mental, and physical health of the mother. The convention, hardly a redoubt of liberal values, reaffirmed that position in 1974, 1 year after Roe, and again as late as 1976. So again, like, what changed? We're going to talk about that in a sec, but I really need y'all to understand, like, this was not a mainline evangelical belief until a very specific period of time, and like the late 70s. And I'll talk a little bit about Paul Weyrich's role. I'm going to read a little bit more from my notes here. Paul Weyrich, so it's important to understand kind of the context in which Paul was working, and the context in which other kind of conservative political movers and shakers were also thinking. In the decades after World War II, evangelicals, especially white evangelicals in the North, had drifted toward the Republican Party, inclined in that direction by general Cold War anxieties, vestigial suspicions of Catholicism, and there used to be a much thicker vein of like anti-Catholic hate in the U.S. A lot of my younger listeners probably don't even know this, but like, yeah, that did used to be a big onus of discrimination. Anyway, and well-known evangelist Billy Graham's very public friendship with Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon. Despite these predilections, though, evangelicals had largely stayed out of the political arena, at least in any organized way. If he could change that, Paul Weyrich reasoned, their large numbers would constitute a formidable voting bloc that he could easily marshal behind conservative causes. So I really want to bring home this idea that, like, abortion unto itself was in a lot of ways astroturfed, in the same way that we see things like some of the protests last year at state capitals, the same way we saw a lot of astroturfing with the Tea Party movement. This very much was some conservative think tank people and kind of making an alliance with, at the time, more obscure evangelical writers who had a very prickly anti-abortion stance, and finding, basically, honing in on abortion as a motivating issue that could get evangelicals to the poll and could constitute a voting bloc that they could pair up with a lot of, pro-business policies, hyper-capitalist policies, in a way that would kind of marriage them together. Because you think again of the sort of soup that they are trying to work in here. The whole white evangelical angle, you still have a lot of resentment about desegregation, some latent white supremacist beliefs among some of the church folks. So you have this idea that, like, if we can kind of build this regressive voting bloc, use abortion and a couple of other key social issues as a linchpin, we could create this extremely dedicated voting bloc that goes to vote as an article of faith. Again, something that a lot of us growing up in Michigan might understand this, but if you grew up in a liberal family, it should not be underscored how much that conservative voters really do look at abortion as like a life or death issue, because they have been primed. They've been primed to think of it that way. Even though, and again, this is the real cynical burn of the whole thing. The evangelical belief that life starts at conception started primarily as a political calculation in order to get people to vote against their interests and for capitalists, and for a motivating social issue that, maybe some of these politicians care about it, sometimes they don't. But I can guarantee you that they all kind of more or less use it as a way to get people who otherwise would probably never in a million years vote for them. It's like, hey, do you want to go vote for some rich guy who's going to cut rich people's taxes, who's going to make it more difficult for people in your community to live and survive and deny you health care? They'd probably say no. It's like, do you want to vote for the guy who's going to save the babies? Oh, well, I guess I will. Because you're telling me the other guy wants to kill the babies. So, and it's by taking this and creating this emotional response to it. Like, they would actually go around on tour. They had this brutal documentary, not too dissimilar to what was it? Project Veritas did to Planned Parenthood a couple years ago, where they exaggerated and lied and gave people a very different picture of what abortion actually was and looked like. They basically went on the evangelical circuit and completely, switch flipped a huge portion of the American population to prime them against abortion, where even just 5 or 6 years beforehand, abortion was kind of seen, even by, again, the evangelicals themselves, as a sensible issue. At the time, it was only Catholics, who at the time were kind of this weird religious minority, as seen by evangelicals anyway. But yeah, it was primarily only Catholics who believed sincerely in the life begins with conception stuff. But it was broadened out for these very nefarious political purposes. And again, I want to read a little bit more that kind of just solidifies this. The religious right and the Christian nationalist movement have been building political power and collecting victories on the legislative front for decades. As part of an effort to mobilize evangelicals as a voting bloc, conservative activists and political consultants working with religious leaders seized on abortion in the late 70s as the activating issue to refashion previously politically averse evangelicals into engaged political actors who could help the Republican Party win elections. The prevalence of evangelical activists in the anti-abortion movement proves the effectiveness and longevity of this effort. Evangelical missionary groups and resources targeting children and young people have been around for decades, but have grown in size and political power in the past 10 to 15 years, until we are now at the point where it's very likely that Roe v. Wade could get overturned. So there is a second part to this discussion we'll be bringing you. We're going to take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your only source for political revolution. And real quick, there are some other really great resources. Just again, some articles you should check out about this. Politico, the real origins of the religious right. Jacobin magazine. It's how to build a left-wing movement against the anti-abortion movement. Very, very good article. And that one is also more kind of long-term strategic and talks more about the mechanics of how to organize against this abortion backlash. But we're going to take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR FM, your only source for political revolution. Hello, we're back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widrfm.org. So, again, if you're just joining us, we're talking about what's going on with the state of abortion rights in the U.S. Again, quick summary. They're in trouble. It is likely the Supreme Court may indeed overturn Roe versus Wade soon, coming months or coming weeks. We just spent some time talking about the history behind the anti-abortion movement, the way it was kind of astroturfed, and used as kind of this motivating social issue for evangelicals in order to maintain a conservative voting bloc. But I also wanted to put some focus on, particularly like the Democratic Party, and where they have really failed to step up to the plate to preserve and protect a lot of these fundamental rights, even when it is in their power to do so, and even when they campaign on protecting these rights from this anti-abortion insurgency. And I'm going to spend more time kind of focused on this really great analysis from Jacobin magazine. It's written by David Sirota and Andrew Perez. Headline is, Congressional Dems are failing to secure abortion rights. And this was published earlier this year, but I feel like this information is still extremely relevant. It's I'm going to go and read from it. Supreme Court's decision to let an extreme Texas anti-abortion law stand has touched off yet another round of outraged tweets, press releases, and declarations insinuating that while the situation is awful and while the court needs to be overhauled, there's nothing that can be done right now to halt America's inexorable lurch towards the Republic of Gilead. This is, in a word, garbage, and it is garbage with a pernicious purpose. Yes, America needs presidents who appoint more sane Supreme Court justices over the next few decades. And yes, the initiatives to expand the court and time-limit judicial terms are important over the long haul. But as Texas empowers anti-abortion activists to become bounty hunters, something can be done in the here and now. Democrats in Washington control Congress and the White House, two branches of government that have the power to preempt not only the Texas law, but can also stop any copycat anti-abortion laws that other Republican states now race to pass. This is something Democratic lawmakers can do today, this very minute, to protect women's health. They don't have to wait 18 more days until their summer vacation is over, as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi suggested Thursday. They can do it right now, or I guess in this case, winter break. And if they once again opt to cite filibuster rules they have the power to change, or if they manufacture some other fake reason for inaction, then they are willfully choosing to take the side of the anti-abortion extremists. The reason that Democrats have the power to invalidate the Texas law goes back to the underpinnings of Roe v. Wade. That case, legalizing abortion, became the law of the land through court precedent, an inherently fragile state of affairs that has now allowed 5 unelected extremists on the Supreme Court to wake up one day and decide to ignore it. They could do so because Roe's precedent has never been explicitly legislated as a federal statutory protection. Since the Roe decision in 1973, Democrats in Washington have never bothered to codify the precedent as a federal law, even when they have held both houses in the presidency. The same story has been now unfolded during the first 7 months of the Biden presidency, allowing Texas Republicans and Supreme Court extremists to take advantage of the negligence. Of course, Biden campaigned on a promise to pass such a federal law, and the good news is that he and his Democratic colleagues in Congress remain in a position to actually make that happen. There's already legislation introduced in Congress to do this. It's called the Women's Health Protection Act. It already has 48 sponsors in the Senate, and its core precepts are wildly popular, according to survey data. The bill creates federal protections against state restrictions that fail to protect women's health and intrude upon personal decision-making, notes a description from the bill's sponsor, Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut. It promotes and protects a woman's individual constitutional rights no matter where she lives. This legislation would use federal authority to invalidate anti-abortion state laws. It makes clear no state government shall enact or enforce any law, rule, regulation, standard, or other provision having the force and effect of law that conflicts with any provision of this act. And yet, as Republican legislators in states across the country have been passing laws to try to restrict abortion, Democrats didn't even introduce the latest version of this bill until June, even though there have been versions of it going back to at least 2013. And then, after Democrats finally introduced it again, the legislation has been languishing in a committee, all while Democrats have been raising money off their promises to protect a woman's right to choose. The bill doesn't have to sit in committee. Democrats can pass it not next week, not next month, but today, right now. And they could ask for help from Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine, who have both said they support Roe and who have both humiliated themselves by previously insisting that the Republican Supreme Court nominees they've approved would not overturn Roe. The arguments against the Women's Health Protection Act are pathetic. Biden promised it, and 48 Senate Democrats are sponsors of the legislation. Avoiding the confrontation in order to appease two Democratic holdouts, Senators Joe Manchin, of course, from West Virginia, and Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, is unacceptable. Likewise, citing arcane filibuster rules as reasons for Democrats to not even have this fight is equally ridiculous. At a time when Republican legislators and judges are laying waste to the rules protecting women's health, a change in Senate rules is the absolute least that can be done. Citing the filibuster as some sort of undebatable law of nature or a movable object is as absurd and insulting as pretending an unelected, fireable parliamentary advisor is the reason America can't get a $15 minimum wage. And I'm going to skip down just a little bit. You can try to come up with inane, unsubstantiated Rube Goldberg machine theories blaming Ralph Nader or Susan Sarandon or Bernie Sanders or Jill Stein or anyone else for Democrats losing winnable presidential races, which then led to the Republican Supreme Court appointees who allowed a Texas law to stand. This kind of fever dream may make Democratic partisans feel good about themselves and shirk responsibility, but here's the thing. The Democratic Party already won the elections necessary to take control of the governmental bodies that make laws and then deliver on their legislative promises. They have the power to enact a law protecting a woman's right to choose. And if they still refuse to do that in the face of the Texas insanity, then they are complicit in the Gileadification of America. Again, that's a Jacobin article. It's published earlier this year. Congressional Dems are failing to secure abortion rights. It's written by David Sirota and Andrew Perez. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or 89 or WIDRFM.org. We'll be right back. Do not touch that dial. This is your only source for political revolution and radio evolution. Hello, wider listeners. It's once again time. It's Media Cyphers. We got about 15 minutes left on the show. There's one last topic I wanted to hit on before we close things out today, and it's what's going on with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, which, quick summation, if you don't know what this is all about. You remember Jeffrey Epstein got suicided about 2 years ago now, I think it was. And of course, Epstein, if you do not recall, was found to be a major sex trafficker for the rich. A lot of underage children were involved. Very nasty stuff. And Ghislaine Maxwell, who was kind of like Epstein's right-hand woman, is now currently on trial. And there's a couple things I want to say. So, first, if you've got anybody in your orbit who's followed QAnon stuff, etc., this is like a very big event for them. Although this certainly is a big event for everybody. And it's funny because, like, usually on our program we would critique the mainstream media for not covering certain things, but in this case, it's actually been getting a lot of coverage on networks like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. Ironically, though, there's this whole cohort of people on the internet who, link this into Q, are kind of saying over and over again as a mantra that, like, the mainstream media isn't talking about it. And it's like, I was over at my parents the other day and it was all over CNN. So it is getting talked about. We could certainly critique the way that the media is talking about it. I have my own particular angle with this stuff as well. But I did want to link this into, there is a very specific link that this whole Maxwell trial has to the state of Michigan. and particularly the Interlochen School and Arts Camp. Maybe some of you went up there when you were younger. I know I had a few friends who did, but some very distressing link from this Michigan school to Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. This is published by the Traverse City Record Eagle on December 3rd. But an Interlochen camper testifies in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. And read a little bit from this. The first of 4 women scheduled to testify in the sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell told jurors she was a 14-year-old 7th grader on a family scholarship at Interlochen Arts Camp in '94 when she met Maxwell and Maxwell's former romantic partner, the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein died by quote-unquote suicide in federal custody in 2019 after a Manhattan judge accepted his not guilty plea on sex trafficking charges but denied his request for bail. In '94, Epstein and Maxwell were jet-setters who traveled to Epstein's mansions, ranches, apartments, and beach houses, accompanied by a rotating cast of international celebrities, politicians, scientists, and entrepreneurs. Prosecutors say the couple also spent that time grooming underage girls. I was in the main campus area where all the students hung out during a break and where all the little cafes were in sort of a gift shop. The witness, testifying Monday under the pseudonym Jane, told the court of her first meeting with Maxwell and Epstein. I was on a park bench or a picnic bench with my friends from camp, and we were eating ice cream, and we see this tall, thin woman approach us. The woman was Maxwell, currently on trial in federal court in the Southern District of New York, charged with 6 felonies, including conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transporting a minor for sexual activity. She has pleaded not guilty. If convicted, she faces up to 60 years in prison. Maxwell was walking a Yorkshire Terrier, and Jane and her friends asked to pet the dog, a court transcript of Jane's testimony states. And probably about a minute later, a man came and joined her, she said. And the rest of my friends, my classmates, left, and I was there by myself. And I sat on the bench still eating my ice cream, and the man sat across from me. The man was Jeffrey Epstein, who Jane said introduced himself and Maxwell as big benefactors of Interlochen's Arts Camp, who visited the camp every summer for their home in Palm Beach, providing scholarships to camp attendees. An email statement released Thursday by Interlochen okay, let's kind of skip down here. Going on to say, so Interlochen's Daniel Bezelstein, the Assistant Vice President of Finance, testified for the prosecution on Wednesday. Question of Hymns covered the organization's extensive record-keeping of both donor communications and student activity. Bezelstein provided the prosecution with an 8-page Epstein file, which testimony shows including letters previously stored in the basement of McWhorter Dorm, a residence hall on campus. One letter, dated February 9, 1984, thanks Epstein for a $200,000 donation. Another letter, which Bezelstein read in court, was addressed to Maxwell from Tim Ambrose, then the organization's vice president for advancement. Please convey to Jeffrey how pleased we are to have such a facility on our campus, the letter stated. In fact, the president-elect will be staying in the lodge until his family's furniture arrives. It is a remarkable place, and we are grateful. So, again, if you want to read the full article, that's Traverse City Record Eagle, Interlochen camper Jane testifies Ghislaine Maxwell trial. There used to literally be a building at Interlochen that was named after Jeffrey Epstein, and these financial records really do indicate a cozy financial relationship with somebody who, it sounds like, used Interlochen Arts Camp as a place to pick out targets or marks. So it's a really horrifying and very local dimension to the international Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell story. Using again, like this arts camp up north as a place to be predatory towards young people. I don't really have a whole lot I want to add, just other than, I think a lot of times, Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, became like a meme all over the internet. And, it's become a fascination for a lot of these like online conspiracy theorists. But I think at the end of the day, we can't forget, like, these are real things, and real people were involved who are going to have to live with the scars of this for the rest of their lives. It's worth noting, some of the most powerful people in the world are implicated in this Epstein stuff. You want bipartisanship, you got both Donald Trump and Bill Clinton shown to be palling around with Maxwell and Epstein. So I don't necessarily think we're going to get anything earth-shaking out of this trial. I think a lot of the more conspiracy-minded people are going to be disappointed. But at the end of the day, I guess we'll have to wait and see if any real justice will be gotten, and if any more of sort of clients or accomplices to these horrible crimes are going to be revealed. But here's hoping to that. But I think this article really does bring home that, like, again, these are all very real and all very horrific stuff. And I hate to leave the show on that note, but it is what it is. But I do want to remind you about that. There's that play coming up. We interviewed Connar about it earlier. Before the shooting, it's going up at Doormouse Theater this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 7:30. If you want to support their arts or see what they're doing, feel free to go check it out. I think with that, I'm gonna take leave of you. Stick around 2:00 for electropop therapy. And until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.